You should be able to share your screen there now.
Okay, let's see if I can work that out. Share screen. Oh, there we go. All right, let's try this one. Share. So let's just go to this. Let's just go to this document here, which is called Notification of Serious Risk of Harm. You might see that it's in red. I actually lodged this complaint and I kept a lot of it in red because I was sensing blood. Now, I'm not going to go through the 277 pages. I'm very pedantic when I get caught up in these cases. I mean, I told you I had 50 arch lever binders when I was 27 taking on Murdoch when he colluded with Peter Abels to stop Holmes of Court taking over TNT. I mean, that's what that case is all about when I was a principal legal officer at the National Companies and Securities Commission. Then when we did the 2011 case with Dr. Hooper, we had 17 arch lever binders. So each of the tribunal members in VCAT had these trolleys and drove them around the bend for 55 days. And that was a massive exercise. So I like lots of paper, although as I'm getting older, it's getting a little bit harder. But this was a 277-page complaint about Dr. Teresa Lazaro, who I called a scholarly misconduct practitioner. Why? Because Dr. Freckleton, I was telling you about the QC that APRA use all the time, he wrote a book called Scholarly Misconduct. So, so I defined this head paediatrician at the Royal Children's Hospital giving out this inaccurate information or failing to give adequate informed consent to this family that the father wanted these children vaccinated at the age of 7 and 9 when they split up, when they'd had a deal at birth that they weren't going to get vaccinated. Now, I went right through this document called the Australian Immunisation Handbook. Now, that's the Bible they say that all the doctors have got to follow, and I'm not going to go through everything, but I also lodged it as a voluntary complaint. This is with the Australian Health Regulation Agency, the Health Complaints Commission Victoria as a mandatory notification. I wonder if I can, why is that going to a split screen there? It'd be easier if I was on one page. Anyway,
well, that's your document doing it.
Sorry?
That's your document doing it. It's doing it from your end.
It doesn't normally do that. You share.
Yeah, I don't have the option to fix that.
I'm going to try sharing it again and then came up.
It might have come up as a PDF. It might be on page view.
It came up. You're going to be hard to see it if it's like that. I don't know what I've done with it now. Sorry about this.
No, you're right. You're right. No problem. Now, just mention while you're looking for that, with the case that I mentioned before, that with what the police have actually done is they've thrown out the original doctor that did the forensic examination of Deborah Robinson. They actually threw his results out, and they brought in their own doctor 2 weeks before the alleged court case, and he made his own forensic examination of the paperwork. He never actually saw Deborah, he wasn't involved at all, and he came to the conclusion there was no evidence. For men, there was no forensic evidence, there was nothing. But that was 2 weeks before the case, and we're talking getting up towards probably 3 years after the actual incident occurred, and he never spoke to Deborah at all. So that's the sort of thing that they can do and do.
I don't know what I've done here. It's not coming up when I do
the... Was it a PDF?
Yeah, I just don't know how it disappeared there, and it's not.
Well, if you brought up your PDF program It should appear in recent documents.
Yeah, I know. I just saw that. Let me just see if I can find it again. Great. What appears? Where is it? Opera. Sorry about this.
You're right. I just mentioned again the name of that detective that's gone missing because everyone's really quite concerned. It's a bit of a shame when detectives lose detectives. So I don't know. Is there a detective? Maybe they've got defective detectives. That's their problem. So that's Detective Anthony Totero. He's the one who brought the case against Deborah Robinson that magically has disappeared and nobody can find him, including the police. They thought he maybe he's taken a long service leave. It's I think they think it's actually pretty funny. So
Okay, we'll try it this way.
so maybe
Okay,
as a result of this video, we'll be able to find Detective Anthony Totero, and he can pick up the ball where he dropped it.
All right, I've got to work out now where to share it.
You've got it. I can see your document now, Peter.
Really?
Yes, Dr. Teresa Lazaro, the scholarly. Yeah, now you're making it bigger. That's good.
Okay. Well, I don't know what I did differently there. Anyway, I mean, these are all the bodies I lodged this document with: the Independent Broad-Based Commission Against Corruption in Victoria, Attorney General, Work Cover, Royal Children's Hospital, Victorian Ombudsman, Chief Justices of Courts, Consumer Affairs, blah, 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 blah. Now, I'm not going to go into much of it, but I just want to point out that the key thing we're saying about the doctors, and this applies to all of them, right? There's been about 100 doctors that have written the Australian Immunisation Handbook. Now, they're regulated by a body called the Australian Health Regulation Practitioner Agency, registers them like we're talking like lawyers and accountants. Now, because I put so much information into this complaint, as you can see, we're up to page 16 here. This handbook, you see that there, Australian Immunisation Handbook, 10th edition. It's actually created by the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation of the Australian Government Department of Health, called ATAGI. Now, you might have heard about them with the COVID vaccine, okay? Now, all these people are named in the document, right? This Australian Immunisation Handbook. And I've counted, there are about 136 named, of which about 100 are doctors and some of them are scientists, right? Now, there's no debate that ATAGI, this committee, designed, developed, prepared, produced, authored, reviewed, peer-reviewed, consulted to, or published the Australian Immunisation Handbook, whatever you call it, okay? Now, the purpose of the handbook was to provide clinical guidelines for health professionals on the safest and most effective use of vaccines in their practice. And it was actually approved by the Chief Executive Officer of the National Health and Medical Research Council on 25th of January 2013. Now, that was Warwick Anderson, okay? Now, that was under Section 14A of the National Health and Medical Research Council Act. Now, I'm happy down the track we have a little working party, and I'll take, you know, some of the more pedantic people in the group to go through all this line by line and explain exactly how it all fits together. But essentially, I'm saying that this handbook is created largely by a bunch of doctors and quite a few scientists, and then it's signed off by the Chief Executive Officer at the time. Now, there's only been two at the time have been farking us over, FAAA, RRRKK, on the basis of all these vaccine schedules that have exploded in Australia particularly. And I counted that we were doing more vaccination than any other country in the first 18 months, which might surprise people, including butchering the kids with a second MMR at 18 months when they don't do that in US and Canada and Europe. So there's 4 live viruses get pumped in there. And that's definitely not on high level evidence, that's for sure, not on zero evidence. So you've got to understand the structure that although these doctors are registered under AHPRA, the handbook is actually approved by this other mob called the National Health and Medical Research Council, NHMRC, under an act there, National Health and Medical Research Council Act 1992. Now, both of those are federal government agencies, and therefore you'd say Greg Hunt, the Minister for Health, is responsible for them. I can tell you for a fact, Greg Hunt says he's not responsible for AHPRA, okay? But he's got no excuse. He's definitely responsible for this mob that approves the handbook. And this is where I think I've got him by the balls. And this is where I need your help, right? So the handbook's supposed to provide the evidence-based guidance, best scientific evidence available at time of publication from published and unpublished literature, okay? So what had happened when they created this document back in 2013, at the time, you could get this on the website. Now, I clicked on this link just before. I was going to show you this document. They wiped it off the system. You can't get this on the website. They got rid of it, right? Because, you know, they completely wiped the website after I did this Family Court Act and the FOI I'm going to show you next. And those two, this document I'm showing you and the FOI, plus the response from AHPRA, they're only 3 documents that I think enough to bring them all undone, right? So back in 2011, you'll see here, NHMRC, paragraph 20, published mandatory guidelines for clinical practice guidelines set out in, that doesn't make sense, does it? Anyway, procedures and requirements for meeting, this is what the name of the document is. This is really important, okay? And if you go back and listen to my live this morning, when I talked about the word V, you'll understand now, if you look at this heading, this is really critical. What I'm about to show you now in paragraph 20 is the absolute key to winning. Procedures and requirements for meeting the 2011 NHMRC standard for clinical practice guidelines, May 2011, version 1.1, with stated purposes to describe the actual standard for clinical practice guidelines and to set out the requirements that must be met in the preparation of clinical practice guidelines to ensure that the NHMRC standard is upheld, okay? So this document was put through a council meeting in 2011, right? And there'd be minutes of those meetings I don't have. Now, I then, and by the way, I did this massive complaint and this whole review of the handbook in a 5-month period when I was being smashed by Meryl Dora in the AVN trying to stop me acting for Chase when he was stolen, and a whole heap of others. And massive complaints to the Legal Services Board to stop me getting my practicing certificate to act in New South Wales. And it took me 5 months to get it. And then I did about a year then helping the family in a massive case before the President Judge of the Children's Court in New South Wales. But in the intervening 5 months when I'd been stitched up, I put this whole background together. So it wasn't wasted. Now, there were 55 mandatory guidelines in this 2011 document, okay? And I argued in this complaint that the handbook breached the majority of the mandatory requirements, and I named them all here, and then I spelled it all out further in the document. I've completely smashed this handbook, I promise you. The NHMRC website notes the Australian government's long-standing involvement with the Cochrane collaboration, right? And the NHMRC strategic plan recognises Australia's key role in supporting and promoting the Cochrane systematic reviews. Why am I harping on the Cochrane systematic reviews? Because I'm the only one in the system that went through a 2-year court case with AHPRA trying to stitch up Mel Hooper, who, by the way, treats Novak Djokovic. He's won 7 out of 8 Australian Opens on the hyperbaric medicine that I kept Mel going on. And I've had it since 2004. Up until a year ago when I opted out of helping Mel again because he couldn't pay me. I was just sick of doing all these things for nothing and going bankrupt, right, just about. So I didn't help him last year, and he's been stitched up by the TGA when I turned my back. They've wiped his website. But back in that court case, 2011 to 2013 in VCAT, that's when I learned about Cochrane. I don't know if any of you know anything about Cochrane. I knew nothing about it. A lot of doctors don't even know what I'm talking about. But that's the high-level scientific evidence where they do these massive systematic reviews of all the evidence they can find based on rigorous standards, not the bullshit that usually gets into these peer-reviewed journals. So Cochrane's been around 20 odd years. back in 2011 to 2013, who had a really good reputation. Gates and others infiltrated in 2016, 2017, so it's lost a bit of its mystique. But that's the highest level evidence, and that's what the government used solely in the case to get rid of Mal Hooper back with his hyperbaric, and he's also had an advanced robotic walking machine as well. So I learned about the Cochrane there. So the minute I've done 2 years with Dr. Freckleton, the guru on expert evidence and the go-to man to chop everybody up, and he was the one that defended Doyle touching up the 4 women, right, with the mayor of Melbourne. You might remember that one. He was the one that did a report and nothing ever happened to Doyle. And by the way, Freckleton, Dr. Freckleton, who I'm talking about, he also acted against Dr. Pearce, the vaccine safety doctor, until I rocked up in 2019. Then he bailed from the case. But he was using all these Cochrane reviews. And that's why I decided I'd go through, once somebody gave me this handbook in 2016, I knew all about the Cochrane. I went through all the Cochrane reviews on vaccination, okay?
Can I just ask, Peter, with the Cochrane review, is that like a set of standards that define how you review information?
Absolutely, yeah. They've got very strict guidelines, right? And they have changed them and watered them down as everyone's realised that Cochrane smashes mainstream medicine, see? And that's why I'm so targeted, because I've been using Cochrane not only in vaccines. I mean, I smashed the Risperdal antipsychotic that was being given like lolly water. I took on Hunt and Susan Leigh Mega in 2015 because we were nuking all the elderly in the nursing homes, giving these antipsychotics that have been banned in the US for dementia. And now poor my mum, you know, gets nuked with 8 drugs in 6 months sitting in a wheelchair when she'd been a great walker. What the far out's going on here? And then I discovered that 8 drugs gone from 0 to 8, 2 antipsychs, and I realised they had a black box warning in the US banned, you know, for dementia because it kills you. And of course, that's when I had a falling out with my family. They thought I was mad. Yeah, crazy. And I took on Hunt and Susan Leigh, who was the then health minister, and Hunt was environment minister. They've since swapped portfolios 2017, and they went to water, and a lot of those indications are now in for Risperdal and other antipsychs that you've got to use them on a short-term basis, and you've got to actually tell people they've got a death risk and a stroke risk.
So with this Cochrane, so it's got standards that you apply to certain information, or the steps that you take to verify that things
what they've done, they've created a voluntary organisation where scientists from all around the world collaborate, right? It was called initially Cochrane Collaboration. And so they appoint, you know, panels of these researchers to analyse the key mainstream medical interventions. And they've got a very well published set of criteria on how to do the Cochrane evaluations. I have seen it watered down in the last couple of years, like just about everything else. And then it's a very detailed report that's produced and published on cochrane.org. And that's where I found here in paragraph 27, there were 128 Cochrane reviews resulting from my September 2017 search of the Cochrane Library, right? Now I've got all of those abstracts in this document, okay? Yeah. Right? And then when I went through the handbook, only 11 Cochrane reviews out of the 128 were actually mentioned. And then in paragraph 28 here, references from the 11 Cochrane handbook references relating to vaccine efficacy and safety are false, misleading or deceptive, or misrepresent the Cochrane author's conclusions. So I couldn't even get that bit right, okay? And I spelled all this out, and I've got it all color-coded. I'm probably happy to put this up somewhere and let people have it. I don't know whether to put it on Facebook. I might put it on, I don't know. We'll talk about that.
But with your work there, Peter, does it also cut across with, was it Del Bigtree and Robert F. Kennedy when they went to court in the States challenging the validity or the efficiency of the safety studies that were done on the vaccines that don't exist?
Well, they don't know much about Cochrane, right? Because in the US, you have to pay to get the Cochranes. So they didn't know what I was talking about. I tried to do a flu case. I took on the five eye countries. I got funded to go to the US in 2018. I was going to catch up with some of the big gun lawyers, and I got sabotaged over there as well but I did get to see Wakefield, and I actually was filmed by Wakefield for his recent movie, but in the end he cut me out because it was limited to the 1986 Vaccine Act in the US. But I wanted to show all this to Kennedy Jr. I'd spent a weekend with Polly and Jonathan Tommy in Austin. Yep. I caught up with Patricia Finn in New York, not in person. I got completely sideswiped by the main vaccine lawyers that do the vaccine court cases. So I realised that they're on the take as well. They didn't want to know about any of this. So they don't know about the Cochrane. Why do we know about Cochrane? Because it's free. The Australian government has put such a priority on Cochrane, we made it all free for the public, see? And that's why they hate me, all these regulatory bodies, because I've stuffed them full of Cochrane for 10 years, right? Plus, we proved in the hyperbaric oxygen case that none of the other ones the hospital uses the hyperbaric for had any better evidence than Mel did, right? And that's why they didn't even use the Cochrane expert in that VCAT case, because I chopped him up on his own stuff. He was biased in the way he interpreted the way Mel uses hyperbaric for neurologic, right? The mainstream say you're not supposed to use hyperbaric for neurologic diseases, whereas Mel says it's a walk-up start, and he's proved it for 20 years. And it just works, and the whole world goes that way, except the people in Australia are still trying to shut him down, and they've...
Well, the hyperbaric chamber, that's basically increasing the oxygen content that's available to the body, effectively, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've got to say, anyone, yeah, I mean, you can prove all this through doing cytokine testing. Now, you might have heard with vaccines, people start to talk about cytokine storms.
Yes.
No one knew about that 10 years ago. Mel was talking about that 10 years ago, and he launched cytokine testing in Australia, and that's the best way to stitch anyone up legally on this, any vaccine. Get your kid or whoever to do a cytokine test. Now, why do I say that? Because the hyperbaric oxygen will upregulate the good cytokines, the anti-inflammatory cytokines, and they'll downregulate the bad guys, right? The pro-inflammatory. So you get a double whammy. Now, I've got all mine. I've done 5 cytokine tests and absolutely changed my cytokine profile massively, because I was a toxic sewer at one point. And then last year I was able to win 2 gold medals and fly around the track cycling like I was a 20-year-old, right? And that's largely because of 15 years of hyperbaric and using every natural therapy and pissing off every drug.
So in that area with the cytokines and through the vaccines, are you aware of Dr. Russell Blaylock?
Yeah, I've heard his name.
He's a neurosurgeon, and he coined the term neuroexcitotoxin.
Yeah.
So, and what we're talking about is what you're talking about, the inflammation of the brain, and the fact that he's worked, or from his studies, that the brain can remain inflamed for up to 17 years from a single vaccine injection.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't surprise me. And this is the causation, right? This is the key to causation, right? And this is why they're desperate to get rid of Mel, right? Because he's involved with the main cytokine testing mob. And I strongly suggest everybody gets a cytokine test if you're going to take a COVID vaccine. It'll show up the damage straight away. How about 2 other key things hyperbaric does? It boosts the oxygen inside the cell up to 20-fold. And it also, this is a big one, can increase the stem cell production of your own body by up to 8-fold with 40 hours of treatment. And the government accepted that in that court case as good science, okay? So you're getting a stem cell boost that'll go to the areas your body needs. You're oxygenating a cell, which means that you're not hypoxic, and, you know, cancer cells are going, what the bloody hell are you doing to us?
Yeah.
And then you get this massive cytokine storm reversal as well. So he now routinely does that to protect himself from people saying he's a quack.
Well, in that area, you've got Otto Warburg received the Nobel Prize in 1931, proving that the respiration of the cell is critical when it comes to people not contracting cancer. So basically the oxygen level within the cells, if this is multiplying the oxygen level, and it gets rid of the bad stuff for the body. Now, you said that this is where you need our help. In what way do you see us being able to help you?
I need to put a one-pager together, right, and put all these critical documents onto the chasetruth.club website, and we've got to bring attention to every doctor about where the lack of regulation is in the movement. Okay, I just want to show a couple more things if I can.
Yeah, no, mate, it's yours to go. I'm just really looking at how we can help you, because there's different disciplines and we're all going to the same direction. And if we have a multi-barbed spear that's got the logic and the direction that you use, but then we've got somebody like, say, Agent Swift, who's got self-executing contracts pretty much.
Well,
is that sort of what you're looking at, getting the different approaches?
Yeah, and I spoke at Magpie House, right, with George Neo and the Know Your Rights guys were there last week, and I'm going to be there all weekend this weekend, and I've been talking to them about this as well. I think all these individuals, and when my punchline from the whole thing, I should have said at the start, right, but I've been a bit pissed off an hour ago when I found that Meryl Dory called me crazy in a meeting last week in Queensland. But you just wring a neck, to be honest. I'm just sick of it. So that's why I'm a bit angry, right? It's only just happened before I got in. But the key is all of the individuals that are named, they're all named. They all can be made personally liable on this stuff, okay?
Yep.
And people can be complaining if they're doctors to the regulatory authorities, and then you can use all your great stuff with this, the common law techniques that people are doing to put liability individually, okay? So let me just say about the importance of Section 40, okay? Then I'm going to switch probably to the FOI, right? And tell you why there's a corrupt document that no judge is going to beat us on, I don't reckon. Section 40 here, or paragraph 40, says the handbook was approved by 25th of January, right? Now, then it was subsequently approved, and this is the important section 14A, okay? The CEO approved subsequent amendments, right? And, okay. And then I found this document, right? This was mentioned in the Australian Clinical Practice Guidelines Register as guidelines portal reference, with the primary developer involved, because they like to pretend no one's sort of responsible, right? Primary developer involved in producing the guideline was known as Department of Health and Ageing. And the interest declaration stated no, defined as meaning this guideline does not include a statement regarding the conflicts of interest of those involved in this development. This is why they wiped it all from the website, so none of you guys can check it out, right?
Yep.
And this is why I'm really angry, because I've said this for 2 or 3 years, and I don't understand why the leaders of the vax movement are trying to jettison me all the time, right? The systematic literature review is stated as yes. In other words, the guideline or related material contains documentation that a systematic literature search and review, blah, 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 was performed. But I say they didn't include them, the Cochranes, right? And then it said, ATAGI provides advice to Minister Hunt now. Back then it was Minister Lay. There's all the terms of reference, blah, 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 blah. Now, this is really important, 48, okay? And now, when you heard me talk today, Stephen, and Trina was on it and might be some others, I'm just smashing the word the. Why am I going to keep every single day mentioning word the? Because Eddie Maguire went down, the biggest player in the media and football, went down on the word proud. One word took Eddie Maguire down, one word. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's the biggest name in AFL football, and he's had to stand down after 23 years as Collingwood president, because when he produced this racism report of how his clubs fared, he said it was a proud day and everyone jumped on his back, and a week later he's had to stand down. Now, I say the word the is the critical word that can win a court case, okay? Now, the printed version, we're no longer printing this document because they don't want people to know that we've absolutely destroyed it. They're just doing it on the internet where they can just change it anytime they like and con everybody. These guidelines were approved, as I said, blah, 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 blah. In approving these guidelines, this is the key. In approving these guidelines, the NHMRC considers that they meet the NHMRC standard for clinical practice guidelines. This approval is valid for a period of 5 years. NHMRC is satisfied they're based on the systematic identification, blah, 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 the best available evidence, make clear recommendations, blah, blah, blah. NHMRC expects all guidelines will be reviewed no less than once every 5 years. This publication reflects the view of the authors and not necessarily the views of the Australian government. Now, why am I saying that's so critical? Because it says they meet the NHMRC standard for clinical practice guidelines. Now, I told you before that there was a document called, in 2011, have a look at this in paragraph 20. So paragraph 20, procedures and requirements for meeting the 2011 NHMRC standard for clinical practice guidelines. That's pretty clear, isn't it? So we go to 40 and it says, what was it? 40, better remember, 48.
48, yeah.
The NHMRC, I'll say it again, here, in approving these guidelines, the NHMRC considers that they meet the NHMRC standard for clinical practice guidelines. I say that the means there's only one document. And that's why they've wiped the website. And that's why they're continuing to create fake fundraisings for me last year and then backroll these other lawyers and don't want to put this stuff in. Okay, now let's
Well, it's saying there's one standard.
Sorry?
It's just saying that there's one standard.
That's the only one. It's 29 pages and it had 55 mandatory guidelines. 55. Now I'm going to show you what they say is the real one. And you're going to count how many mandatory guidelines they have to satisfy. And I'll tell you in advance, it's 0.